Ewan, it's time for you. You had an interesting parable. Can you take us through that?
Yep, this is the parable of the bigger barns or the foolish farmer. It's called by different names, but essentially it's a story about a man who has excess, but he doesn't know why he has it and doesn't know the best thing to do with it. Although he does decide ultimately what he will do, and that is that when he has a bumper crop, he has a much larger crop than he typically would have, and he's not sure what to do with all of this excess, and he decides that what he'll do is he'll knock down his current barns, his storage facilities, and he will build even bigger ones to house this crop on the assumption that he has this excess for his own purposes and it will see him through the remainder of his life. He can put up his feet, retire, and sip martinis until he dies. And yet that very night, God comes to him and says, in case you didn't realize, tonight is your last night on earth. I'm taking your life. What good has it been building these bigger barns or making plans to do so? Unfortunately, when Jesus, and he did spend a lot of time talking about wealth and possessions in a number of forums, and I think Jesus has kind of got a bad rap in regards to wealth and possessions, as though he's very much anti-wealth and anti-rich people and anti-possessions. Nothing could be further from the truth. I think Jesus was aware of the fact that a rich person with a really good heart can be a very, very powerful instrument for the kingdom of God. Certainly, I'll read out a passage shortly, but Paul also was very aware of the fact that rich people had a part to play. But the central question of the parable that I looked at was, what do we do with our excess? Why are we blessed with abundance? Why do all of us, particularly those of us in the first world, why are we blessed with a little bit extra? And let's face it, all of us really do have a little bit extra. Otherwise, none of us would buy an ice cream or go to the movies or buy a book. If all we had was just enough to scrape out a subsistence kind of life, we wouldn't be able to enjoy these few luxuries that I've just mentioned. So all of us do have a surplus. And the question is, what do we do with that surplus? Why do we have extra? And what Jesus, I think, was trying to teach through that parable was not that riches, wealth, and possessions are bad things, but rather you are blessed with abundance. Many of us are blessed with abundance so that we can then go on and be a blessing to others. That we can use that those possessions, that wealth, those resources to bless others. That's primarily why they are given to us. And the most productive, profitable, purposeful thing that we can do with our surplus or our extra is to invest in people and building the kingdom of God. So the passage, I think that's really the takeaway. If you were to ask me what the takeaway message of the sermon was, it would come from the words of Paul in 1 Timothy 6, where he says, instruct those who are rich in this present world, and you would expect him to say, instruct those who are rich to sell all that they have and come follow me or follow Jesus. But he doesn't say that. He says, those who are rich in this present world, tell them not to be arrogant and not to fix their hope on the uncertainty of riches. Instruct them rather to do good, to be rich in good works, to be generous and ready to share. So there's nothing wrong with being wealthy, having lots of possessions, as long as you realize that you've been blessed to be a blessing and that what God intends you to do with your extra, with your surplus, is to be rich in good works, to be generous and ready to share.
It kind of takes you back to the Acts model of church, where everyone did sell their possessions for the betterment of the kingdom rather than for the betterment of themselves. And I think there's a great parallel there that what this is saying is that it's not just about those who are in your local church context, but about the kingdom right the world over. So you can be a blessing to those you don't even know just by, I don't know, my excess. What I'm going to do, I'm going to donate $100 to this charity because they need to be blessed as well. I think there's a great parallel there that you can be rich in whatever your term of rich is, and still be useful to God, because I think far too often many Christians feel that you have to be poor to be a Christian.
That's right.
And that's not the case at all.
Yeah, and the problem with the farmer was that he had spent his entire life acquiring. It wasn't that he was rich. It was that was his focus.
Yeah.
So he just put it all into a barn, his barn on his property.
Yeah.
It was all for himself.
The big barn.
Locked the
That's
door.
right.
Yep. And of course the ridiculous part is that not only did he fail to share his wealth, but he also didn't enjoy his wealth. So it was a complete.
I wonder how much of it he would have traded for a few extra years.
Absolutely, yeah.
Because that
that's a
whole
really
saying
good-
about, you know,
yeah.
we spend, what is it, all this time sacrificing our health to get wealth, but then we spend all our wealth trying to get our health back.
That's right.
That is so true. I love that. Yeah.
Yeah. So, you know, he probably found at the end of the day that the more important commodity was the time that he had rather than
The wealth.
the
Absolutely.
wealth that he had, or in
Absolutely.
combination, how he used the wealth during the time that he had.
Well, I suppose the question that we could ask then is how do we use our time to bless others as well? Because wealth is one commodity that we have, that we have perhaps in excess. Time, for some of us, we may have in excess as well. How do we use our time for the betterment of the kingdom to bless other people?
Yeah. When I spoke, when I delivered my message, I talked about this parable in conjunction with another one of Jesus's weirder, more way out parables, which on a first reading is very difficult to sort of decode and unpack. The parable of the deceitful manager. This guy...
No reference to
To the business
He
mind.
was an education manager.
Okay.
Sure. This guy is about to be fired because he's of some dodgy business practices that he's just been found out for. And he starts to panic and realizes he's going to be fired. And so he decides to spend the rest of the day very quickly ringing around some of the customers of his boss and offering them the chance to settle their debts for 50% less than they normally would have had to have paid. And while he's on the phone to them, he says, "Now, I've done you a favour. Just letting you know, I'm about to leave my present company and I'll be looking for new employment opportunities. Could you please keep me in mind?" And so in leveraging the debt that they owe his employer and offering them a 50% discount on it, he also leverages that for his own purposes and sort of networks with these other professionals that he's ringing in the hope that they will eventually employ him when he's fired from his current position. Funnily enough, Jesus, in summing up that story, says that that guy was a really, really switched on guy. Deceitful, yes. Would you hire him yourself and trust him? No. But Jesus at the same time praises him for the fact that he's street smart, he's street savvy, that he knows how to use his time profitably, which is to network very quickly with people, to build community so that he can fit right in to a new circumstance once he's fired from his present company. Jesus' moral that he draws from all of this is that we as Christians also need to be purposeful with our use of time and money. They are resources that are given to each one of us to be used for the purposes of the kingdom. Just as that deceitful guy was using time very, very profitably and very efficiently to be able to set up a scenario that was going to be of great benefit to him, that Christians should be doing exactly the same kind of thing with their time and money as well. Investing in people, building networks, befriending people who you may have a profound influence on over the course of their life, and who knows, you might actually end up in heaven together, and they will be there waiting to welcome you when you walk through the pearly gates.
The irony is that wealthy people value time the most in the world. I mean, they don't need more money.
Yeah.
They want time. And I'm sure, I think as you said a moment ago, Tony, this guy, I am sure, when his life was called upon him today, would certainly have traded his wealth for a few extra years.
Now, it's interesting that all of these parables have time as a feature, and for most of them, the delay in the return of the bridegroom or the master or whatever is looked upon as something of a drudgery. You know, it's delayed. It's on and on and on it goes. But perhaps we could actually look at the delay as a gift.
Yes, absolutely.
Because it gives us the opportunity to prepare, to have another chance,
And you can
to evaluate our
Share.
performance, maybe have the chance that this guy didn't have, the guy who tore down his barns, and and maybe found doing something worthwhile when the master does actually return.
Well, something that's come through for me today is the idea that we need to have a follow-up session where we look at the question, so then how do we live? Given that we've all identified the fact that there is this delay, some people give up on going to the the banquet. Some people give up on waiting for the bridegroom to arrive. So endurance and the patient endurance of time and what you do in that waiting period seems to be critical.
And it's a gift.
And so maybe in a follow-up session we could talk about some of the spiritual practices, some of the spiritual disciplines that those in previous generations have practiced that allowed them to stay intimately connected to God and allowed them to be those patient time dwellers.
As opposed to the complacent time dwellers.
Exactly. So spiritual practices and disciplines, you don't hear those talked much about in churches today, but I think in our busy, crazy, mad 21st century world, we need to rediscover those spiritual disciplines and be talking about them more.
And to put those routines in our life.
There's an interesting passage too in toward the end of the Bible where the prophet actually says, the Lord is not slow keeping his promise, but he will return. The elements will be destroyed in fervent heat. And then he basically says, knowing all these things, what sort of people ought you to be?
Yeah. How then should we live?
How then should we live? It's going to happen. The storm will come. It's all going to end.
You've been given the invitation.
You've given the invitation. You've got the time. Because he is delaying, but he's not slow in keeping his promise. He's delaying because he doesn't want anyone to perish.
Well, thanks guys for coming in today and being
Pleasure.
a part of this chat. We'll give you one last opportunity, if you can, in 5 to 10 seconds. One last message if you want anything, Anthony.
Live life today, live in the kingdom now. It's amazing.
Di?
Recognise the value of the gift that we've been given, which is we actually have the gospel. We know the gospel, and don't squander that. So don't waste your time on a whole lot of this, a lot of iPadding and whatever, and just, think about how you're using your time.
Kylie?
Build your life on Jesus as your rock, and then you'll be unshakable.
Fantastic. And Ewan?
God is not against you having wealth and possessions, but he does want you to question why you have them.
Awesome. Right. Thanks, Tony, for your time. That's been valuable.
It's been great. It's been a really good discussion.
Maybe we will come back and follow up.
Look forward to it.
Thanks for joining us, guys. If you want to have a look at all of these discussions differently, independently, feel free to click on all of the links, and you may even see these faces again in a follow-up series.